Now from WCP Media Services, Kenneth Yas.
Just a brief story before I go into this. I just spent the last 10 days or so, I think it was around 10 days, setting up for exhibiting at and then breaking down from the American film market, which is a completely different group of people than shows up at SMT or NAB or IBC or any of the other specialty technical trade shows. This is not a group that is particularly interested in technology, and that's best exhibited by the fact that they would come up to me in the booth and say, "Are you buying or selling?" And I would say to them, "I'm doing neither. I'm presenting a service offering for you for the distribution of your content." At which point, most of them were at the other end of the hall, their eyes glazed over, and they don't want to hear about it. However, it's an important consideration, albeit a little bit mundane in comparison to some of the cutting-edge technologies we've heard about and the enhancements to existing technologies that you're familiar with. This product is really for the organization, the uploading, the storage, or cloud-based storage, organization, and delivery of high-value content, whether that be episodic content or standalone content. We work in television, we work in feature films, we work in documentaries. We can package up content above and beyond the master file to create collateral packages. It becomes a very effective and convenient tool for organizing material that, for example, at least 150 of the exhibitors at the AFM hadn't even thought about recently. When you approach them, they basically say, and this is a group of independent filmmakers and distributors, well, I have a servicing person do that, and they're not at this show. Or I have some familiarity with how we do it. Let me see, we use Dropbox, we transfer, we occasionally use FedEx, sometimes videotape, generally hard drives. And I said, well, where are all these located? Well, most of the time we let our lab do it. And in the world and the parlance of independent film production, a lab is a video facility, a post-production facility. Generally one that has an emphasis on distribution or file management and distribution, because that's certainly the exercise that we're dealing with now when it comes to the delivery of content internationally. So this product is called WCP Media Services. It's essentially a startup. It's probably one of the youngest companies having presented here today. It's European-based. It's in Switzerland. Our data center is in Switzerland. Our backup and disaster recovery center is in Geneva, another large city in Switzerland. And yet, everything can be mediated from any location on any browser. And that's part of the job of our development team, to keep up with browser updates and make sure that everything is working correctly, so that if, for example, content has already been uploaded and being managed in the cloud, you can do a delivery from any location, including any Starbucks. And it does work that way. As long as you've gone through the heavy lifting process of getting content into the cloud, and it is a private cloud. We're not dealing with, we don't have API hooks in Amazon or Azure or IBM at this point. We're a business-to-business, point-to-point private cloud solution. As long as you have your content managed in the cloud and it's active content, easily accessible, you can send it from point to point from any location that has any kind of internet connection, even a marginal internet connection. Let me proceed through this a little bit to show you what's going on. This is the main screen, and all assets are accessible from the main content screen with a variety of search categories available. This is most akin to what you would see, let's say, in a flat asset management system such as iTunes. Everything is located in one large bucket and accessible via a variety of powerful search functions. In this case, we have some filters that you can apply. We have something called the subcategory level, which means you can customize filters, you can customize search criteria so that it becomes even more granular. We have some established, built-in, boilerplated filters and search criteria, but you can also create your own, which allows you to get to any genre of content, any type of content very easily. The structure or taxonomy of how content is uploaded into the system and recorded into the system follows along the lines of what I'm used to, and I'm sure a lot of post-production folks are used to when it comes to creating versions of content, creating original content and versions of content that have to be distributed in the television world anyway to a variety of networks and other sources. In this case, there's a root content known as original content, every time you upload a piece of content, you must create a content record. But the only item you have to put in that content record under this particular tab is the original content name. Once you've done that, you can continue the uploading process, and that can either be an individual item or multiple items, and you can come back later and fill in all the other information you want. In this case, you'll also notice that you have an IMDb code. If you know the IMDb code, which is easily accessed from IMDb, it's located in the browser address. You can put that in there, and it will auto-populate a variety of fields in our content registry in order for you to see what that is. You don't have to manually enter it. It'll come right off of IMDb to the extent that it's been entered into IMDb. And what I've learned from using this function is that sometimes people are very specific, sometimes they give you just the bare bones of what you need to know. But it's helpful. The next tab over in the digital asset management system, and that's really what we're dealing with here, is a industry-centric digital asset management system. You have the version tab. The version tab, especially for international distribution, is a powerful tab because it allows you to identify each language version of a particular piece of content, which is important, obviously, for international. As we move along, we come to another structure for episodic television content, which is a little different than standalone content, because obviously we're going to have multiple episodes associated with a given series and a given title. And this allows you to enter those multiple episodes and list them and provide, when we go to the next tab, some very specific information on them. Up to and including that window off to the right, which is a metadata window. That's auto-populated from the header of the file. And we are dealing here typically with high-value content. These are not in this case, these are not low-resolution versions of an individual content file. These are the master files with associated audio tracks. That window can be expanded, and you can see just a ton of information about any given file along the lines of what you'd find in a container check for an automated QC program. So what we've done essentially is kind of broken down individual pieces of content into their various component parts, and you can search them from a number of different criteria, and you also can evaluate them from a number of different criteria. Collateral is something else. Well, let me actually back up a second. The one thing to know about this, and I don't have the tab, I don't have this particular window open, is that often this content comes with anywhere from 12 to 15 tracks of original audio embedded into the file. We're dealing with a ProRes file, typically for episodic TV, or a DNX file. All of those can be reflected as well, up to and including 5.1, 7.1, separate M&E, stereo fold down. If it's contained in the original file, it can be recorded in this asset management system and easily identified. The other thing that comes along with any individual piece of content is the ability to associate collateral material with this. This becomes very important for episodic television. Why? Because you have key artwork, cast and crew, adders, broadcast script, anything from a PDF all the way up to just about any kind of document can be associated and linked to that piece of content. So that, for example, for a VOD delivery, all of that is contained in a single package and is delivered as such. So you're not only getting that master file, but everything that you have linked to that master file. And again, we can go anywhere from a PDF all the way up to a DCP. We can pretty much move any piece of content. An unlimited number of collateral files can be associated with it. We're not just limited to a small number of collateral files. There's a simple, for uploading content, especially with episodic, there's a simple set of steps that you follow so that if you had an entire series, which some of our clients do, because we're dealing with libraries of thousands of titles that are being sold on a regular basis, and you're not just moving one episode on a weekly basis necessarily, you may be moving a couple hundred episodes from 3 or 4 seasons of a given TV series. It's a fairly simple step to at least get that content uploaded sequentially in using these 3 steps. Without going into a lot of detail, it's not that hard, and it follows a very logical pattern. We also have a transcoding engine built in. Our customers to date, we certainly have a few of them in Los Angeles, oddly enough, have some of their own transcoding engines. The Teranex is very popular among reality television producers these days, and you see them in the offices. But if necessary, and for some versioning, one in particular that we're doing for a network show, they need a more powerful engine, and we support a number of different transcoding engines in our suite, up to and including Alchemist from Snell & Wilcox for doing frame rate conversion, which is probably one of the best devices out there for doing it. These are an on-demand automated process for us to get that done. And that template continues to stay in the system and can be used for future transcodes as well. All video assets can be published in a screening room. So for promotional and marketing purposes, which was of particular interest to people at AFM, we have a screening room capability a la what you would see in Vimeo, for example. However, there is more security built into this than into any one of the public platforms that are used for typically used for screening. And anybody who has been invited as a guest into a screening room environment must sign up. It's free to them, but nonetheless, they must sign up with a username, change their temporary password, and all of a sudden they have a secure guest environment in which to look at content. Now we have recently introduced multiple screening rooms. So for example, for a distributor, let's say like a Lionsgate or a Weinstein, they've got product across multiple genres and they want to target that product to individual exhibitors. So they will take, for example, all of the romantic comedy or all of the action adventure, put it in a separate screening rooms and send it to a targeted group of people. We also have begun to support dailies distribution. So we have backed into acquisition and post-production to some extent. Typically, we work with finished programming. But in the case of a couple of the productions that are happening in Europe right now, we are a European-based company, they've looked at the alternatives to what we have available, which include systems like PIX and DAX, which are perfectly respectable systems, but rather expensive and somewhat limited in their application. And they're saying, you know, your alternative is, what you're providing is pretty good, a lot less expensive, and gives us greater flexibility. So, for example, we're working on a project now for HBO called The Young Pope, in which case about 75 stakeholders are getting content delivered to them on a daily basis, whether that's work in progress, cuts, whether those are dailies. Folks at HBO are getting them. Canal Plus, who's also invested in that series, is getting them. Over 100 individuals are getting content on a daily basis as either dailies or works in progress, which makes it a little bit different and a lot more economical than some of the other systems out there. Although I don't want to take away anything from DAX or PIX, they're perfectly respectable systems embedded in the studios to some degree, but we believe we have a viable alternative. Dailies can be published in a screening room and distributed to the stakeholders, as I said, and this is what the screening room looks like. Dailies can be in the form of string outs or compilation reels, in which one chunk or one file represents all that dailies that are all strung out together, or we can create individual dailies as well. And you can annotate the dailies. So any guest in the screening room, to a certain extent, can collaborate in the creative process if that's what they want to do, and make annotations that are seen by all members of it. This is a typical approach to how we would move dailies offset into a number of different environments. On the left, you see the onset component part of this, in which the DIT or an assistant editor in a near set or onset location is going to create DNX36, for example, as an editing medium or a ProRes, and then upload it into the cloud. When it gets into the cloud, we automatically make an H.264 of every piece of content that comes into the system. That comes with the system. And consequently, at that point, it can go in two directions from the WCP data center. It can go to the editing room and can be loaded into a given editing system. That's not an automated process yet. We're not hooked into any of the integrated into the editing systems yet, but we are talking to them. And they also can be published in separate screening rooms as H.264, since that's what we automatically create for every piece of content so that it can be viewed within the system. the account administrator or anybody who has administrative privileges in the system will soon recognize that this is an enterprise-wide system, that you can assign permissions to a different group of people to do a variety of functions from this particular screen. It's very flexible and it's very powerful, and it allows hundreds of people to participate, if necessary, hundreds of people to participate in the system in different ways. So the system is not, it's one-to-one in the sense that everybody needs an account in order to access whatever content you're giving them permission to see, but at an administrative level, there can be an entire community of individuals working within the system internationally. We've also integrated for uploading and downloading purposes both Aspera and Signian, which are two UDP-based platforms that accelerate to some degree. They would take issue with the way I'm describing it, but nonetheless, they leverage your internet connection. The key to this system working effectively, I must point out, is that you need to have bandwidth sufficient to upload a piece of content that may be anywhere from 10 to 100 gigabytes per file. That generally requires something better than 20 megabits per second up, better than a typical, let's say, Time Warner business class connection. To have 100 to 500 megabits up and down, depending on where you're at, is preferable. If you have something in that range, either Aspera or Signian really leverage that connection. One thing to point out about our Aspera integration, we can go point to point, account to account using Aspera Connect, or if, for example, the recipient wants to receive it under their Aspera license because they have a fastback server, we can push directly to that server without them having a WCP account. And that's the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ken.